The air was too still for a Thursday morning. The sun hung low, diffused through a faint veil of humidity, making the asphalt shimmer as if breathing. At the corner of Delaney and 14th, beneath a flickering crosswalk light, Clara Henderson stood waiting, one hand gripping a paper grocery bag whose thin handles bit into her fingers. Inside, bread, milk, canned beans, a folded bus schedule. The bag trembled slightly, though her hand did not. A bus hissed away from the curb, leaving behind a faint scent of diesel and the murmur of traffic. She adjusted her shawl, watching its red taillights fade into the distance. She had paid her fare, a crumpled dollar, a handful of coins, but the driver had muttered something about exact change, and she, with her soft voice and arthritic hands, had not heard him clearly. When the officers came, she thought they were there to help clarify. They smiled at first. Officer Tanner approached with a clipboard, his partner Voss trailing half a step behind. Both young, both pale from the shade of patrol cars and station lights. Their uniforms were crisp, regulation perfect. Their posture slightly rehearsed, the stance of men who have been told they represent order. "Ma'am," Tanner said, the word carrying the weight of both civility and command. "Can we speak with you for a moment?" Clara blinked, shielding her eyes from the sun with a trembling hand. "About what?" Voss gestured toward the departing bus. "Driver says there was a fare dispute." "Said you refused to pay?" Clara frowned. "I gave him my dollar." "I always do." Her voice was level, almost weary. The bus driver was long gone. The paper bag crinkled in her grasp as the wind shifted, lifting the corner of a receipt tucked against the bread. Thin proof, easily overlooked. Tanner nodded mechanically, jotting something on his clipboard, though nothing of substance had been said. His pen scratched with a deliberate slowness, as if writing were the ceremony that made accusation real. "You have a receipt for that fare?" Clara hesitated, eyes flicking down to her bag. "It's on the bread, I think." "The store—" "Ma'am," Voss interrupted, stepping closer, tone tightening. "Do you have identification on you?" She reached carefully into her purse, movements precise, deliberate. The choreography of someone long trained not to make sudden motions near authority. The purse's clasp snapped softly. A few coins glinted, a folded photo, an expired bus pass. She handed over her ID with both hands, the way one might present an offering. The younger officer took it, eyes scanning without seeing. "You live nearby?" "Yes, 2 streets over. I was just—" "All right," Tanner cut in. His politeness had cooled into a thin film of procedure. "Let's just step over here, ma'am. We'll sort it out." They moved her toward the cruiser parked half in shadow. Each footstep felt rehearsed. Even the breeze seemed to slow to accommodate the ritual. Her paper bag thudded lightly against her knee. A can rolled against the side and dented. Inside her chest, her heart beat a rhythm she recognized, not panic, not quite fear, but the ache of repetition. She had seen this before, in smaller forms, the tightening of eyes, the practiced tone of accusation wrapped in courtesy. Her husband had once told her, years ago, they don't need to shout for it to be violence. Tanner murmured something into his radio. Static replied. Voss lingered beside her, one hand resting idly near his holster, casual, unthinking. The sun struck his badge, and its gleam reflected across Clara's sleeve. "Ma'am," Tanner said, lowering the radio. "There seems to be a record here. Minor ticket from 2 years ago. Missed a court date?" Clara looked confused. "I paid that. I went to the courthouse myself." Voss smirked faintly, not at her, but at the script unfolding as expected. "Maybe they didn't process it right." "Maybe," Tanner echoed. "We'll verify that downtown. For now, we'll need you to come with us." The words landed with the soft inevitability of rain. Not loud, not cruel, just certain. Clara blinked. "Am I under arrest?" A pause. Then, with bureaucratic precision, "You're being detained pending verification." She stood still. The paper bag in her hand shifted its weight, the bottom sagging slightly where the receipt had begun to slip free. It fell, turning in the air like a leaf, landing face down on the pavement beside her shoe. Neither officer looked at it. Tanner reached for the handcuffs. The metal clicked once, a sound designed to be heard. She offered her wrists without being told to. Her fingers trembled as the cold steel met her skin. "Watch your step," Voss said, guiding her toward the cruiser. His voice carried an echo of politeness, hollow and exact. The door handle gleamed like a surgical instrument. As they passed the edge of the sidewalk, the paper bag gave out. The bread and milk tumbled to the ground, the can rolling into the gutter. The bag's torn paper fluttered in the breeze, a fragile surrender. Tanner bent slightly, then straightened again without touching it. "We'll log your belongings at intake," he said flatly. Clara did not answer, her gaze fixed on the can as it wobbled to stillness, reflecting the pale morning light. Somewhere in that reflection, the distorted sky, the bent image of her own posture, she saw the world's quiet contempt. The back seat of the cruiser smelled faintly of disinfectant and plastic. The door closed with a heavy seal, shutting out the hum of the street. Her reflection appeared faintly in the window. Lined face, calm eyes, steel glint at her wrists. The car began to move. Through the glass, the world blurred into motion. Sunlight over rooftops, the color of sameness. The grocery bag remained on the pavement, its contents scattered like evidence of something forgotten. They drove in silence. The officer said nothing. The radio murmured brief codes and numbers. Clara sat upright, her hands resting in her lap. Her dignity remained, bruised, unbroken. She did not lower her gaze. At a stoplight, she saw the police station ahead, low and angular, its facade an anonymous beige. On the side wall, a faded American flag mural rippled faintly in the wind, stars and stripes half erased by sun and time. As the car turned into the lot, the glass caught both reflections, her face and the painted flag, merging into one image, the citizen and the system. Bound together in silence, the cruiser door opened. The sound of keys, metal, procedure. But for a moment, as she stepped out into the harsh light, the world held still, a suspended second between accusation and record, between the living and the filed, and then the machinery resumed. The police station smelled of burnt coffee and ammonia. Its air was refrigerated to discomfort, the kind of chill that erased individuality. Every sound, every movement was functional, calibrated for continuity. Nothing here stopped. Nothing ever quite began. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, long glass tubes casting the same indifferent white across every face. The walls were pale gray, faintly reflective, so that everything, the flesh, metal, paper, seemed to merge into one continuous tone. It was not cruelty by intention, but by design. The architecture itself was procedural. Clara Henderson was led through the main lobby, her wrists still cuffed, though there was no threat in her posture. Her gait was slow, deliberate, her steps careful on the linoleum floor. Each heel click echoed longer than the last, swallowed by the rhythm of typing and telephones. Behind a counter, a young clerk entered data without looking up. Female, 73. "Resisting verification," Officer Tanner recited, voice flat, reading from his clipboard as though reading from scripture. The pen in his hand tapped twice against the paper, a small percussion of control. Officer Voss leaned against the desk, his radio still clipped on, its static murmuring like a nervous tick. The clerk asked for the arresting officer's badge number. Tanner read it out automatically, then reached for the stapler. A paper jam. He shook it once, twice, then used the back of his pen to unstick it. A momentary irritation in an otherwise perfect system. The report began to take shape, the physical manifestation of accusation. Every box checked, every signature aligned. The form itself was immaculate, neat, rectangular, official. The narrative inside it would become real by the mere act of transcription. Behind them, a copier whined. Another phone rang. The soundscape of process. Clara was told to sit on a metal bench near the wall. The seat was cold, unyielding. Across from her, a framed poster displayed the department's mission statement. Integrity. Service. Accountability. The words gleamed under the light. Too polished to be read with sincerity. Her hands rested in her lap. The cuffs were removed, but the indentations remained. Shallow impressions, faintly red. She rubbed them with her thumb quietly. No one noticed. Tanner and Voss stood at the counter, joking softly with another officer about the morning's incident. "She made a scene over a bus ticket," Voss said, laughing under his breath. Tanner added, "Said she paid." "They all say that." Their laughter was not cruel in tone, but in absence, the absence of recognition. To them, she was already file number 113429. The joke was procedural, too. A printer spat out the arrest report. The sound was sharp, almost gunfire in the sterile quiet. The pages curled slightly as they emerged, warm and smelling faintly of toner. Tanner gathered them, aligned the edges perfectly, clipped them under his arm. He glanced once toward Clara, not to see her, but to confirm her presence, like confirming a box was checked. "Hold her till verification," he said to the clerk. The clerk nodded, typing. His fingers moved fast, detached. The keys clattered with bureaucratic confidence. Behind the counter, a clock hung above the break room door. Its second hand moved with visible precision, ticking audibly in the pauses between phone calls. It was 10:47 a.m. The light reflected off the clock's glass face, throwing a faint halo across the opposite wall, a false sanctity, almost religious in its constancy. A sergeant entered from the hallway, eyes on his clipboard. "What's this one?" he asked without looking up. Tanner handed him the papers. "Fair dispute turned detainment. Possible warrant." The sergeant flipped through the report. "Old one?" "Yeah, 2 years. Court never cleared it," the sergeant grunted. "Keep her in processing till we confirm. Don't need another complaint about false release." The irony of false release hung in the air. The idea that releasing an innocent person too soon might be a greater risk than keeping them confined. Process before people. The sergeant moved on. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss, like the exhale of a machine resetting itself. Clara sat motionless. Her gaze traced the fluorescent tubes above, each one trembling faintly, their buzz constant, hypnotic. Her reflection appeared faintly in the polished floor beneath her feet, warped and pale. She thought of her grocery bag lying on the sidewalk, milk leaking in slow circles around the can of beans. She wondered if someone had thrown it away by now. Across the room, Tanner filled in the final sections of the report. Subject compliant. No resistance. The words were meant to convey calm efficiency, but they also erased the discomfort, the humiliation, the fear. Compliance was safety, not for her, but for them. A telephone rang again. The clerk answered, nodding, typing faster. The same words repeated. Processing, yes. Still waiting on confirmation? Understood. No one raised their voice. No one questioned the premise of her being there. The machine continued exactly as designed. Voss sipped coffee from a paper cup. You think this one gets logged or kicked? Tanner shrugged. Doesn't matter. Papers filed. He tapped his clipboard again, a habit. The sound merged with the ticking of the clock. Tap, tick, tap, tick. Time flattened, not linear, not alive, just measured. The station hummed under the fluorescent glare, its rhythm self-sustaining. Paper moved through hands. Keys struck plastic. Pens signed names. Each gesture fed the system, quiet, precise, immoral. Clara exhaled slowly. She could feel the air vibrating faintly against her skin, the low electrical hum that filled the silence. Her body felt transparent, as though the light itself were searching for something to reveal. From the far end of the room, a janitor pushed a mop bucket across the floor. The wheels squeaked with each rotation. The smell of bleach followed him, sharp, clean, absolute. He avoided looking at her as though eye contact might slow the work. At 11 Taki, the intercom buzzed. A voice announced a shift change. Chairs scraped, footsteps shifted. The hum continued. Tanner left his clipboard on the desk. Voss signed the custody form with quick strokes. Lunch after this? Yeah, burgers. Routine devoured significance. Everything fit the pattern. On the counter near the printer, a corner of the arrest report curled upward from the warm air vent. The paper trembled slightly like breath. Beneath it, the shadow of the clock's second hand crossed and recrossed the page, black and precise, the passing of time rendered as bureaucracy. Clara glanced up again at the clock. 11:12. The second hand swept forward, smooth, unwavering. Outside the sealed windows, a siren wailed briefly and faded. Inside, the station remained unchanged, its light, its hum, its silence, all intact. The second hand reached the quarter mark, clicked once, and continued. 30 minutes remained. The first ring came just as Maya Henderson was returning from the printer, a stack of federal case summaries balanced against her hip. The office was quiet except for the low whir of the HVAC and the muted clatter of keys. A weekday silence, the kind that absorbed urgency until it sounded procedural. Washington mornings always felt that way, fluorescent steadiness, a calm engineered by policy. The phone rang again. She set the papers on her desk, their corners aligning perfectly, and answered. Office of Federal Litigation, Maya Henderson speaking. A pause, then a voice, thin and shaken. Are you related to a Mrs. Clara Henderson? Elderly woman, short gray coat? The voice trembled like bad reception. Maya straightened, the ID badge at her collar swinging slightly as if pulled by gravity. Yes, she said carefully. That's my grandmother. Who is this? I was on the bus with her. The cops, they just took her. Said she didn't pay her fare. But she did. I saw it. The caller stopped, breath catching. They just put her in the car. I thought you should know. Maya didn't speak at first. The sound of the caller's breathing filled the line, uneven and human against the antiseptic hum of the office. Where? She asked finally. Delaney and 14th. About half an hour ago. They took her toward the station. Maya's hand found the edge of her desk. The wood was cold beneath her palm. Thank you for calling, she said, her tone flat, controlled. Please don't involve yourself further. She hung up, slowly. The silence that followed was dense, the kind of silence that rearranges the air. She looked at the clock above her monitor. 11:14. The second hand swept forward in smooth, indifferent circles. Her coffee mug sat half full beside the keyboard, the surface reflecting the strip of fluorescent light above. She reached for it, then stopped midway. Her hand hung there, suspended between habit and rupture. The mug remained untouched. She opened her drawer, pulled out her personal phone, and scrolled through the saved contacts until she found one labeled simply, Roth. She hesitated only once. A breath. No more, before pressing call. The line rang twice, then a voice, measured and unhurried. Marshal Roth. Sir, it's Maya. We have an incident. Go ahead. My grandmother's been detained by local PD in Arlington. Fair dispute on a public bus. Witness claims excessive force. Silence. The faint hum of air conditioning. Then quietly, is she in custody? Yes, another pause. She could hear him exhale through his nose. Not surprise, but calculation. When? 30 minutes ago. Which precinct? She gave the name. He repeated it once, tonelessly, like verifying an address against a map in his head. A few keystrokes echoed through the line, the faint click of a mechanical keyboard. Does she have priors? No. There was an old ticket that should have been cleared. Should have, he said softly. That's the word that breaks everything. Maya swallowed, forcing her voice steady. Sir, I'm aware of conflict of interest policy. But this isn't conflict, he interrupted. It's misuse of authority. We respond to that. A silence followed. Not hesitation, but moral arithmetic. Then his voice clipped and final. We're moving now. Maya exhaled, the air leaving her in a slow, deliberate stream. Understood, sir. Stay at your desk. If anyone asks, this is standard procedural intervention. Yes, he ended the call. The sound of the line disconnecting, a single click, felt heavier than any shout. Maya set the phone down carefully, aligning it parallel to the edge of the desk. Her ID badge swung again as she sat. The lamination caught the light, flashing the emblem of federal authority across her chest, an identity both armor and chain. Around her, the office continued its rhythm, muted typing, low conversation, printers sighing out forms. None of it noticed the shift that had just occurred, the invisible transfer of weight from one institution to another. She looked again at her mug. The coffee had cooled, a faint skin forming across its surface. The smell was bitter, sterile. She thought of her grandmother's hands, thin, deliberate, dignified, resting in her lap beneath fluorescent lights. She opened her monitor's secure portal, entering Roth's case code. The field read, "Pending enforcement coordination." The cursor blinked at the end of the phrase like a held breath. On the 10th floor of another building across the river, Marshal Roth stood in his office, jacket half-buttoned, tie slightly loosened. The blinds were half-drawn, slicing the sunlight into disciplined rectangles across his desk. His laptop screen displayed a jurisdictional map. Federal, state, local lines tangled like veins beneath translucent glass. He was a man who had long ago made peace with obedience. But there were moments, rare, specific, when obedience bent to clarity. He typed the precinct name. The station's record loaded, its digital architecture precise and indifferent. Charges: failure to pay fare, possible outstanding warrant, subject compliant. He stared at the words. The banality was what sickened him most, how cruelty could be formatted. He reached for the phone. "Marshal Unit, 2 vehicles. Arlington Precinct. Immediate retrieval order under federal oversight protocol." The dispatcher's voice came through, efficient and unemotional. "Confirmed. Response team mobilizing." Roth's hand rested briefly on his badge, a gesture not of pride but of grounding. The metal was cold, heavy against his palm. He had carried it for 20 years. It had outlasted marriages, wars, administrations. It was not a symbol of power, but of duty, a difference he guarded fiercely. He closed his laptop. The soft click of the hinge sounded final, almost ceremonial. Around him, the office was still. No alarms, no urgency, just the low hum of computers and the faint shuffle of papers in distant rooms. Yet beneath that stillness, something had begun to move, a system turning against itself, slow and deliberate. Roth stood at the window. Outside, the city stretched in precise geometry. Avenues, courthouses, monuments, all cast in the same sterile light. He could see the federal seal etched on the building across the street, mirrored faintly in the glass. For a moment, it looked inverted, as if the institution itself were looking back at him, questioning. He slipped his badge into his pocket. His reflection merged with the seal, indistinguishable. Then he walked out of the office without a word. Behind him, the phone on his desk blinked with a silent notification. One call missed. Time stamped 11:22 a.m. The clock above it ticked once. Steady and unfeeling. The silence that followed filled the room completely. The silence before enforcement. The holding room was smaller than Clara expected. No windows. Just a rectangular space wrapped in gray paint that couldn't decide whether it was clean or merely pale from repetition. The air was heavy with disinfectant, that faint citrus sting that hides the smell of people who have been afraid here before. A metal bench ran the length of one wall, bolted to the floor, cold and indifferent. The chain that linked her cuffed wrists to the bench clicked once when she shifted, then fell silent again. Its sound was small but absolute, a punctuation mark in the machinery of control. She sat upright, back straight, hands resting loosely in her lap. The bench was too low for comfort, designed not for sitting but for waiting, a posture between submission and endurance. Her gaze was steady, fixed on the far wall where a thin seam of light leaked from beneath the door. The light flickered occasionally when someone passed in the corridor like a pulse. Time in the holding room had no shape, only light, sound, and stillness. Her shoes were polished. They always had been. The left toe carried a small scuff she had meant to fix that morning. It caught the overhead light now, a single imperfection made visible by fluorescent honesty. The floor beneath her feet gleamed faintly, reflecting her shoes, the chain, the lower edge of her coat. It was as if the room were built to record, not to comfort. Footsteps approached. The door opened with a hiss. A young officer entered, barely older than her grandson might have been, clean uniform, unsure eyes. He held a small plastic cup of water in one hand, filled halfway. His other hand fidgeted with the keys on his belt. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "You should drink something." She turned her head slowly. The movement was precise, deliberate, unhurried. "Thank you," she said. He crossed the room, set the cup on the bench beside her, and stepped back quickly, a retreat disguised as respect. He didn't meet her eyes. His posture betrayed confusion, taught to offer kindness, forbidden to feel it. She lifted the cup with both hands. The plastic bent slightly beneath her grip, the water trembling inside. She drank once, then placed it carefully on the floor between her feet. The officer lingered a moment, as if expecting gratitude to take a form more comfortable for him. It didn't. "Someone will come talk to you soon," he said. "I know," she replied. Her voice was soft but anchored, carrying weight disproportionate to its volume. It filled the space the way slow heat fills a sealed room. The officer nodded, uncertain what to do next. His mouth opened, closed. He turned and left, the door sealing behind him with another hiss. The room resumed its equilibrium. The sound of laughter drifted faintly from the corridor, muffled through the wall, distant but unmistakable. A burst, then another, followed by the clatter of a vending machine. The noise carried the easy rhythm of people who believed their world was still in order. Clara's eyes returned to the light beneath the door. Her face remained unreadable. The laughter faded, leaving the low electric hum of the ceiling light. It was a steady hum, almost musical if one stopped resisting it. The song of systemic stillness. She leaned back slightly against the wall. The paint was cool against her shoulders. Every detail in the room had a clarity she could not escape. The thin crack along the ceiling joint, the fingerprint smudges on the mirror, the faint metallic taste in the air. It was as if the room wanted her to know exactly where she was, to feel every inch of her displacement. Time passed differently here. Not in minutes, but in heartbeats. Her mind wandered not to fear, but to observation, the rhythm of the chain when she breathed. The cup's reflection on the floor, the way the fluorescent light gave everything the same color, erasing difference. Her silence was not compliance. It was refusal, a conscious decision to give them nothing to interpret. She had learned long ago that words could be twisted, tone could be misheard, breath could be weaponized. So she sat and she waited, and in that waiting was a kind of power. Outside, shoes squeaked against tile. A door slammed. A male voice, distant, joking, said something about paperwork for the old lady. The others laughed again, but softer this time, as if even they sensed something beneath the surface that did not belong to them. Inside, Clara's stillness grew sharper, like a blade honed by patience. Her shoulders squared against the wall, spine aligned as if preparing for ceremony. Her eyes remained forward. The hum of the light deepened, a constant tone that merged with her breathing. She could feel her pulse slowing, not in resignation but in control. She thought briefly of her granddaughter, Maya, the way she always checked the locks twice, the way her ID badge swung when she walked. She imagined her now in some tall building surrounded by other badges, other names. A thought passed, fleeting but solid. She'll come. She did not pray. She did not plead. She simply held that belief in the same still way she held herself. The cup between her feet caught the light now, its surface rippling faintly each time the ventilation system exhaled. The ripples formed, dissolved, returned, motion contained within containment. At 11:35, the hallway outside grew quieter. No more laughter, no more footsteps, only the hum and the low, distant clicking of a typewriter or keyboard somewhere beyond the door. The machinery of procedure continued. She shifted her weight, and the bench chain clinked softly again, metal brushing metal. The sound seemed louder this time, reverberating against the walls, as though the room itself had been waiting for any sound to prove she was still there. Her shoes caught the reflection of the overhead light again, the same small scuff visible, a mark of having walked, of having lived. From the other side of the mirror, two officers stood watching. The mirror's surface captured their faces faintly, blurred, uncertain. "Why is she just sitting like that?" one whispered. The other shrugged. "They usually talk. She's just staring. Yeah, they all break eventually. But she didn't. Inside, Clara remained motionless. Her breath was steady, her eyes fixed on the seam of light at the door. To her, the silence was not void, but message. Every second she refused to speak was a second she denied the system its preferred narrative, the one that needed her voice to confirm its legitimacy. Outside the glass, the officers said nothing more. They watched. The fluorescent hum filled every pause, relentless, mechanical, pure. The camera of narration, if there had been one, would have pulled back now, slowly, carefully. Through the two-way mirror, the image of Clara became distant, smaller, framed by gray. The young officer who had brought her water stood behind the others, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed downward. No one spoke. No one moved. Only the hum remained, steady and eternal, the sound of light itself, burning without conscience. At precisely 12:02 p.m., the air in the precinct shifted. It was not dramatic. Not the sound of sirens, not a shouted command. It began with the low, synchronized growl of engines. Two black vehicles idling at the curb, their polished surfaces reflecting the washed-out daylight. The hum was steady, deliberate, a sound calibrated for presence rather than spectacle. Inside, the front desk clerk looked up from a stack of intake forms as the automatic doors parted. 3 U.S. Marshals entered, dark suits, badges clipped at their belts, movements stripped of everything unnecessary. They did not announce themselves. The room recognized them before they spoke. Their boots struck the linoleum with measured rhythm. 4 beats, then a pause, then another 4. Every sound was contained, intentional. The fluorescent light above them flickered once, then steadied. Officer Tanner, who had been leaning against the counter, straightened. "Can I help you?" he asked, tone reflexively polite. The lead marshal, Roth, removed his sunglasses with a small, exact gesture. His expression was calm but precise, like a man operating a finely tuned mechanism. He held up his badge, the metal catching the light in a muted gleam. "Marshal Service. I'm looking for a detainee brought in at approximately 10:30. Female, 73, named Clara Henderson." The clerk blinked. Yes, sir, she's being processed." "Just waiting on verification for—" Roth's eyes moved to him unhurried. "Verification for what?" The pause that followed was almost imperceptible, but it stretched thin through the room. The sound of a printer running in the background seemed suddenly too loud. Officer Voss stepped forward, clipboard in hand, voice careful. "Old warrant, sir. Traffic fine. We're confirming." Roth nodded once, as if confirming something far larger. "Good. Let's confirm it now." He walked past the desk without invitation. The marshals followed, boots echoing with identical cadence. Every step felt judicial. Behind them, the station's air conditioning hummed louder, as though the building itself had begun to tense. A lieutenant emerged from an office down the hall, his tie slightly loosened, eyes narrowing at the sight of the newcomers. "Can I ask what this is about?" Roth turned toward him. "Marshal Roth, Federal Enforcement Division. We have reason to believe your officers have unlawfully detained a U.S. citizen without probable cause. We are here to rectify that." The lieutenant's hand hovered over his belt buckle, an unconscious gesture toward control. "You can't just walk in here and—" "We can," Roth said evenly. "And we are." The silence after that statement carried its own gravity. The stillness of men who suddenly remember they are part of a hierarchy they do not control. In the corner, the door hinges of the captain's office creaked open. Chief Dempsey stepped out, tall, gray-haired, the weight of tenure on his shoulders. He moved like someone accustomed to authority being a room's default setting. "What's going on here?" Roth turned to face him. Their eyes met. Authority against authority, badge against badge. For a brief second, the distance between them felt like a courtroom. No noise, only judgment. "Marshal Roth," he said again, "your officers have a 73-year-old woman in custody on a 2-year-old clerical error. No active warrant, no probable cause, no due process. We'll be taking her into our protection." The chief's jaw tightened. "You have paperwork for that?" Roth reached into his jacket, unfolded a letter embossed with the federal seal. "Authorization under Title 28, Section 566. You can verify it if you wish." "We'll wait," The chief took it, scanning the page without seeing it. His fingers trembled faintly, a detail he tried to hide by shifting his stance. Behind him, his officers watched in stillness, caught between loyalty and comprehension. "You're saying I'm saying," Roth interrupted softly. "You made a mistake. We're here to correct it before it becomes something worse." The chief handed back the document. The faint scrape of paper against paper echoed unnaturally loud. "Fine. You'll find her in holding." "Good," Roth said, not smiling. "We intend to." He gestured to the others. They moved down the corridor, their pace deliberate but unhurried, not rushing, not hesitating. The sound of their boots on the linoleum rolled through the hallway like a metronome of consequence. Behind the two-way mirror, Clara was still sitting exactly as she had been. The hum of the fluorescent light had not changed. The young officer with the uneasy eyes looked up as the marshals entered. His throat tightened. "Unlock her," Roth said. The officer hesitated, glancing toward the lieutenant standing behind the marshals. The lieutenant nodded once, a small, resigned motion, the surrender of authority dressed as compliance. The keys jingled softly as they turned in the lock. The sound was intimate, like breath in a quiet room. Clara looked up when the cuffs came free. She didn't flinch, didn't thank them. She simply drew her hands back, rubbed her wrists slowly where the metal had bitten into her skin. The marks were faint, but visible, the system's imprint pressed into flesh. "Mrs. Henderson," Roth said, his tone neutral but low. "I'm Marshal Roth. We're taking you home." She nodded once. "I know." Something in her stillness seemed to affect the room. Even the light felt quieter. The young officer stepped back, avoiding her gaze. The lieutenant exhaled, shoulders slumping. Roth turned to his team. "Escort her out." As they moved toward the hallway, the door hinges groaned again, slow and metallic, the sound of a threshold crossed. The corridor seemed brighter now, though the lights had not changed. The clerk at the front desk stood as they passed, unsure whether to salute, speak, or look away. He did all three in quick succession. Behind him, the clock above the wall read 12:28. Roth stopped for a moment at the entrance. "Chief Dempsey," he said quietly, not turning back. "You'll be contacted by our office. There will be documentation." The chief nodded, his face expressionless, hands clasped behind his back like a man awaiting a verdict. Outside, the sunlight was blunt and colorless. The marshals guided Clara toward the vehicles, each step of her polished shoes clicking softly on the concrete. She did not look back. When the car door closed, the reflection in the window caught both her face and the station behind her. Two worlds, layered in glass. Inside, Roth remained for a moment longer, watching through the open doorway. The station's fluorescent hum reached him from down the hall, that same mechanical tone, constant and hollow. He stepped forward and let the door shut behind him. The hinges released a final metallic sigh, as if exhaling the tension from the air. The marshals' vehicles pulled away, their engines fading into distance. In the holding room, the metal bench gleamed under the light, the chain resting coiled on the floor like a discarded thought. The marks on Clara's wrists would fade by evening. The system that left them would not. The federal building at dusk looked nothing like justice. It was beige concrete and mirrored glass, sealed windows and uniform corridors. The air smelled faintly of toner and brewed coffee gone cold. The hum of the HVAC system was steady, like breath regulated by medication. Inside, Roth sat behind a metal desk. The computer monitor glowed pale against the gathering dark. His jacket hung neatly on the back of the chair, sleeves folded over one another, the posture of order even in stillness. Before him lay the typed report. 8 pages, double-spaced, numbered and footnoted. The story rendered into procedure. Each sentence was exact. Dates, times, badge numbers, cross-referenced case codes. There was no outrage, no color, no moral register. The language of accountability had been reduced to description. Violence translated into commas and clauses. Across from him, Maya sat with her ID badge clipped to her blouse, the government seal catching the dim light through the blinds. She looked exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from awareness. Awareness had its own weight. You've read it? Roth asked without looking up. Yes, she said. Her voice was quiet, precise. It's thorough. He nodded once. Thorough isn't always enough. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. They were both people accustomed to silence as part of the job. It wasn't absence, it was discipline. Roth continued typing. The rhythm of the keys filled the room, mechanical but deliberate. Each click was an act of containment, turning outrage into record, memory into evidence. The clock on the wall ticked. Each second sounded longer than the last. Maya leaned back slightly, eyes drifting to the blinds. The evening light had thinned into narrow golden stripes across the wall. Sunlight filtered through slats. Moral light filtered through systems. It caught the edges of Roth's face, half in shadow, half illuminated. You did the right thing, she said. He stopped typing. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. There's no right thing, he said finally. Just what the system allows you to do before it closes the door again. She looked at him, not with surprise, but with understanding. Still, she said, you opened it. Even for a moment. He exhaled through his nose, a sound closer to fatigue than relief. Moments don't change systems. They just leave marks. Maya nodded, glancing at the manila folder resting beside the keyboard. It contained Clara Henderson's statement, 2 handwritten pages, her script careful and even. She had refused legal counsel, refused compensation. When asked what she wanted recorded, she'd written, I want it written down that they were polite while they hurt me. Maya had read that line 5 times. Each time it landed differently. A moral calibration, a mirror turned toward them all. Roth reached for the folder, slid it open, and reread the same line. The fluorescent light above them hummed faintly. She understands the system better than we do, he said. She's lived under it longer, Maya replied. He nodded again. The clock ticked. Outside the office, the hallway lights dimmed automatically, a feature installed to conserve energy. The motion sensors would relight the corridor when someone passed. No one did. The building was quiet except for the distant sound of a copier somewhere down the hall, printing another set of forms for another case. Maya stood, pressing her palms to the desk for balance. Her coffee mug, still half full from hours ago, left a ring on the file cover. She didn't wipe it. Some marks didn't need erasing. What happens now? She asked. The report goes up, Roth said. Internal review, Civil Rights Division, the usual ladder. It'll reach a desk where someone decides what it's worth. And the officers? Suspension pending inquiry. He paused. Then reinstatement. Almost certainly. The words carried no malice, only clarity. Maya's eyes fell to the typed pages. The words use of force minimal and subject compliant, repeated like echoes of bureaucratic ritual. It doesn't sound like what happened, she said quietly. It never does, Roth said. He reached for the signature line, signed his name with deliberate precision, and dated it. 12:47 p.m. One more entry in the ledger of necessary fictions. He clicked Save. The screen dimmed for a moment, then froze on the final page. A single blinking cursor at the end of the report. A mechanical heartbeat. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling tiles. They were perfectly square, perfectly uniform, indifferent to the moral calculations taking place beneath them. Maya picked up her ID badge, clipped it to her bag. She's home now, she said softly. I know, he said. He didn't ask how she knew. He assumed she'd gone to her grandmother that night, stood in that quiet kitchen where dignity felt heavier than grief. She hesitated before leaving. Thank you, she said. Roth didn't respond. Not immediately. Only when the door clicked shut did he whisper, Don't thank me. The room settled into stillness. The sound of the clock filled it again, steady, unblinking. He looked once more at Clara's statement. At the simplicity of it. They were polite while they hurt me. He closed the folder. The action was slow, final. The hum of the fluorescent light pulsed once more before stabilizing, as though the system itself refused to rest. Outside, Through the half-open blinds, the city unfolded, buildings rising in neat rows, streets lit by the harsh geometry of sodium lamps. Somewhere out there, the precinct continued its work. Same lights, same forms, same quiet machinery. In another holding room, someone waited. In another office, another report was being written. Truth thinned to the weight of paper. Roth turned off the monitor. The sudden darkness was complete. Only the clock's steady ticking remained unbroken. He gathered the folder, placed it in the outgoing tray, and stood. For a moment he lingered, looking out at the skyline. Each illuminated window seemed to belong to a different version of the same institution. Hundreds of rooms where judgment was processed into text. He left the office light off when he closed the door. The sound of the latch was small but final. The hallway lights flickered on as he passed. The motion sensors recognized presence. Systems always did. Then they dimmed again behind him, returning the corridor to stillness. Outside, the camera of the world would pull back, higher, wider, until the federal building became just another box of light in the grid of the city. Below, countless others. Stations, offices, courtrooms, waiting rooms, each one humming, each one ticking, each one turning. The machinery of power, still and endless.